Okay, then we had a very important conference that same year, 2015, through the UN, and they issued a declaration on the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on Iran. And this was amazing because this was ending the fear of like a Third World War breaking out over Iran. A lot of people in America and Israel were saying, Iran is dangerous, they're evil, they're trying to get nuclear weapons. This is in spite of the fact that the supreme leader of the Iranian people had said, we are not getting nuclear weapons because they're against God. We actually follow Islam, and in the Quran you're not allowed to kill innocents and so on. Nuclear weapons do not discriminate, they just destroy entire cities. Therefore they are absolutely un-Islamic, and we will never ever cultivate them. But the trouble is, when you tell the Americans this again and again, they have this capacity for, having deteriorated intellectually so far since Kennedy was shot, they seem to have a lack of capacity to understand the difference between true statements and false statements. There's a certain logic that you can bring to bear, which philosophers have written about for many centuries actually, on how to distinguish between a true statement and a false statement. Seems to me, whatever the American education system is doing, it's no longer got the capacity to turn out people that achieve high office in that country who have got that basic skill. And also to issue true statements as opposed to false statements. There's a breakdown happened in the educational process in the USA. And so, anyway, incredibly, the UN, with help from the European Union, bless us, and the UK and France and all the other countries, we got together with Russia and we got this declaration signed, which was guaranteeing that Iran would never develop nuclear weapons. I mean, they'd said as much, but, you know, just to help the Americans, they signed a 200-page agreement with lots of details. I give the full text. Israel, unfortunately, wasn't invited to sign. I think this is a mistake. I think Israel should have been brought into this discussion and should have co-signed it, because essentially, you know, when they feel left out, they get angry and they don't trust anybody. Poor Israeli leadership, the Likud type, seem to have this inbuilt paranoia against Iran. I don't know, they've never been there. I'd love Netanyahu and co, you know, to actually go and visit the country. It's got synagogues functioning. It's got loads of churches. It's got interfaith tolerance. Whereas Saudi Arabia, which they love so much, won't even allow a single church to be built or a single synagogue. I mean, it's as if the Israeli right wing have got the same problem that the American right wing have got, of inability to distinguish between truth and falsehood. They've forgotten the fundamental philosophical teachings. So this declaration, therefore, you know, sealed the deal. And it was when Obama was president, who was an intelligent man, he was one of the more intelligent of the presidents, who actually realised that peace is better than the Third World War. Unfortunately, that treaty, as I explained in the footnotes, has been abrogated by this Trump chump. And, you know, I mean, a lot of people nowadays in coronavirus time think Trump is a genius, he's doing this or that, but I'm sorry, you know, his moral intelligence is minus 100, and this is one of the evidences for it, and it has to do with this fundamental lack of veracity. Okay, then there was the World Parliament of Religions meeting in Salt Lake City in 2015, which I give a declaration from. Then there was the UN Security Council resolution on the role of youth in peace building in 2015. And that was important because, yeah, young people, I mean, a lot of the younger nations of the world, there's like huge numbers of young people now. I mean, I'm really old compared to the majority of people on the planet. But the really important decisions are being made by really, really old people. And it was James Fasey, a great Swiss thinker, who pointed out the real conflict in society is between sort of old people who have all the power and the wealth and the young people who don't. So if we're going to get peace on the planet, we have to get young people involved. And this UN Security Council resolution sort of made that clear. I mean, the population of Gaza and Palestine is mostly young people in their 20s and much younger. That's why we have to get peace in Israel-Palestine for the sake of youth. And therefore they can help us do it. And this is how they can be brought into the peace-building process. Then there was a declaration in Marrakesh in Morocco, which I've been to. I love Morocco. This was in January 2016. I give the declaration. This was a very important gathering of Islamic scholars, top level, like Dr. Zaki Badawi, who I used to work with, top level Islamic thinkers all over the planet, saying, we have to make absolutely crystal clear that Islam is not a religion which persecutes other Muslims. It has to stop doing all these fatwas and declaring this or that group heretics. It has to stop, allowing women to be persecuted and so on. So it was an authentic Islamic conference which was saying actually Islam is not a fanatical extremist club for idiots, but a broad church for people that have got the spirit and not just the letter of what Muhammad said. In Islamic scholarship there's a huge industry of Sunni scholars that go into every word Muhammad ever breathed. I say mainly look at the Quran and get the spirit of the thing. And go to source, go to the mother of the book, because where the Quran came from is the Kitab, the mother of the book. And a person of spiritual integrity who's developed their spiritual intelligence or their enlightenment capacity can understand what the Quran is saying if you just look at it through that eye of the heart. And that's what Ibn Arabi, that's what the Sufis have done through the centuries, and that's what Islamic scholars have done. Anyway, what was lovely is they came together in Marrakesh and issued this amazing declaration. You have to read it. It's the antidote to all the fanatical wars going on in Yemen and Syria and Iraq between the so-called Sunnis and so-called Shias. I mean, they're all un-Islamic, these conflicts. They should stop immediately, which is why I've called for Sunni-Shia reconciliation. The treaty is here in the Marrakesh Declaration. Then in St Andrews, in my beloved Scotland, there was a lovely thing called the Declaration of Humanity, organised by a professor of theology up there in 2016, which is, it's a much shorter and simpler version of my Interfaith Peace Treaty. It's very simplistic, but nevertheless worth reading. Then in 2017, there's a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons in New York at the UN General Assembly. Now this is incredibly important. My mother was a anti-nuclear weapons campaigner for her whole life, adult life. And working with Bruce Kent and many other CND and nuclear weapons people. And they came together and eventually, sadly my mother didn't live to see this, but the peace movements of the world got this through the UN, and it was set up as a treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons. And many states have signed it and joined up and said we will never ever develop nuclear weapons. Iran has signed it. Israel hasn't, because they have nuclear weapons. Britain hasn't signed it. US hasn't signed it. Russia, France. So the thing now is, there's the treaty. We need to put pressure on each state, nuclear weapon state, to have a formula whereby they can disarm universally and simultaneously, and that includes China, Russia, all the rest of them, Israel, and there's the treaty. It's all ready to sign. So incredibly important, actually. Now, I give the treaty here in full for the first time. Many people around the world don't even know the treaty exists or have never read it, so here it is. Then we have, I went back to Hyderabad in India in 2017 and took part in the formation of this World Intellectual Forum. Now, I mentioned a few people who are involved with that. There are others. And we've come together to try and bring the power of mind. I defined a Buddhist as a cosmic intellectual. So we're trying to harness the power of cosmic intellectuals, but not just in Buddhism in a formal sense, but also there are cosmic intellectuals in Jainism, like Acharya Tulsi or Mahapragya, his disciple, or in Christianity, people like Aquinas and their equivalents today. There are cosmic intellectuals among the Christians. The same among the Jews, people like Maimonides in the old days. Well, Rabbi Friedlander, who I knew and worked with in London, he was a cosmic intellectual. These are what I call wisdom agents. And in Islam, people like Dr. Zaki Badawi, who was the brainiest, most amazing Islamic theologian I've ever met, who sadly has died, who was a good friend of Prince Charles. Look, these people are the cosmic intellectuals, and what we're trying to do is bring them together into this gathering so we can bring our collective mind powers to bear on solving these global problems, including this silly lockdown that we're all suffering from. Well, the solution to that is obvious. Get rid of these biological weapons labs and make the professors go out and do something useful with their knowledge. Ban them from doing this kind of ridiculous research and stop funding them. So anyway, we had fun. We met in Hyderabad and issued the declaration, and it was a inspiring event. And so I give the text here. Then I went back to Jaipur again for the 9th International Conference on Peace and Nonviolent Action, hosted by these wonderful Jains again. And the conference theme this time was on science and spirituality and universal peace. And that is a topic dear to my heart. Some of you know I used to lecture at the University of Oxford, a course on religion and medicine, and I've been fascinated by the history of medicine in different religions and the different physiological theories and elemental theories, what is the body and so on. And then how does it fit to the soul? And so science and spirituality have been one of my lifelong interests. I could have become a scientist. I chose to become a philosopher because to me that is science and spirituality combined. And I taught courses at the University of London on ecology and spirituality, and that's why I set up the Green University, which is a haven for thinkers that want to do joined up research, don't want to split it up, but want to keep in an integral perspective their different fields of knowledge, so they can work on all the 9 petals of peace in one institution. So we came up with this declaration, which again I give the full text here. Then there was an event in Birmingham. The Peace Charter for Forgiveness and Reconciliation was signed. Largely it seems the work of Joseph Berlin, one of my colleagues who's Professor of Education and Global Ethics at Birmingham University in England, a city I know and love well. And they came up with a really good declaration because Birmingham is a very multicultural city. It's got many Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Jews, whatever. Great university. And so they came up with a lovely declaration saying, let's focus on forgiveness and reconciliation. And I give the text here. It's a good document. Then there was a team in France, in Toulouse and elsewhere, a friend of mine organised a thing called the Oath of Humanity in 2018. And I give the declaration. It's very short, it's like 1 page, but it's just saying, look, I promise to be a good human being on behalf of the whole planet, and I won't criticise and attack other people. It's just very simple. It's like my Interfaith Peace Declaration, which is like 54 paragraphs condensed into 1 page, and very sweet, put together by some French people, so it's in French as well. Then there were problems in 2018, if you recall. England and Russia, or Britain and Russia, but mainly Westminster, and the Privy Council decided that Russia was the devil incarnate. And under Theresa May, who I was very disappointed with her intellectual capacity, she suddenly produced this whole narrative that the Skripals were being killed by Russians. And Boris Johnson, who was foreign minister at the time, was bigging this up in Parliament. And we, the people, haven't got a clue if they're telling the truth, because the Russians were denying everything and were saying this is propaganda. To this day, we have seen no hard evidence that the Skripals were killed by order of Putin and the Russians. I think it's incredibly unlikely. What we had instead was a propaganda war and the takeover of Parliament by the Privy Council, who only in the Privy Council was the intelligence shared, and on that basis Theresa May then attacked Syria because they were, so all kinds of nonsense was going on in the de-democratising of British foreign policy in the name of secrecy based on what may well be lies. And there's no way that the average Brit can actually test and check this stuff. So, and because I know, some Russian thinkers of a high order, and because I love Russia, and I don't hate any nation, I love every nation on the planet, because I love Gaia herself, and these nations just come and go. They're like ripples on the surface of Gaia, right? But I have been to Moscow. I know the depth of Russian people in their soul. And so we issued this statement about Anglo-Russian relations, calling for an international cyber peace treaty. What we were saying is, this is ridiculous to have these information wars being fought out in cyberspace. The Russians calling the English all horrible capitalists, actually they weren't, but they might have been. And the English media calling Putin the devil incarnate and so on. It's all just a nonsense. So what we said in this declaration of peace is that we need a cyber peace treaty. Okay, so we've got the Interfaith Peace Treaty, which I've drafted here. I haven't drafted, but I called for lawyers and international experts to draft a cyber peace treaty, whereby nations would undertake not to have their official hackers, attacking through the internet, through the cyber world, other nations and dissing them and spreading disinformation about them. And that would include all nations should sign that. So we came up with this visionary proposal in 2018. And I was very chuffed when at the end of the year, I think the next year, it might have been that year actually, at the General Secretary, the General Assembly's launch conference in New York, September the 21st, it happens every year, the heads of state go along and make a speech. And that year, Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, went along and made a speech, in the course of which he called for a cyber peace treaty to be negotiated. And he initiated discussions at the Security Council in the UN. Well, I suspect that he'd read our declaration. Somewhere in Russian bureaucracy had got it through to him. And he realised the importance of that. But of course in the West, you won't hear about this. You won't see this in the Times or the Telegraph or on the BBC. There's a hawkish mob taken over these media outlets who have lost their morality and lost their way, and who don't understand the importance of peace. So my book won't be reviewed in these fora because they're not interested in peace, it seems to me. And dissing Russia is just good business for them. Anyway, then I issued a declaration. Well, it was issued under the World Intellectual Forum hat on peace in Yemen, calling for an end to this civil war, a mediation, and a reconciliation between Shia and Sunni forces. Then there was a very important congress in Astana. You remember I mentioned the pyramid at the beginning of the Peace and Reconciliation Palace. So this took place in 2018. They had the 6th Congress of the leaders of the world and traditional religions. And they met in that pyramid up on the conference floor. I wasn't there, but I can imagine the scene. And they issued a brilliant declaration calling for everything that we all want. Peace through spiritual understanding, through tolerance, through study, through research, through goodwill, really. So everyone should read that. And then there was an OCSE declaration on the role of youth in peace building, joining the UN in that call. The OSCE is the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which had helped sponsor that Treaty of Paris way back in 1990. It's still going, it's still doing good peace work. It includes the whole of Europe across from east to west. And here they're calling for the young people of Europe to get involved in peace building. I think that's very important. I think young people should be allowed, instead of, in the old days we used to have a military recruitment process in most European nations. You had to go and serve a year or two in the military. I think now young people in Europe should be offered a year or two in a voluntary peace building unit of service, which you can do anywhere in Europe. And you could go to another country, Spain or wherever, and do something good for the community. You get a small stipend, like a trainee soldier, but you'd be doing piecework. So you might end up painting and decorating a village hall. You might, and I think Britain should be part of this island as well. It should be open for people, whether they're in the European Union or not. It should be a pan-European project. Maybe the OSCE could organise it. Yeah. Okay, then there was a declaration in February 2019 between the Pope and the Grand Imam of AlAzhar University, which is in Cairo, the greatest university in the Islamic world, apart from Qom. And my dear friend Dr. Badawi was a graduate of the AlAzhar University, which means the shining one, the glorious one. It was founded by the Shia dynasty of the Fatimids, who were very clever, and they realised that the most important thing you can do for a country is found a university. That's why I founded the Global Green University. It's like the AlAzhar of the Green movement. Well, it's interesting, AlAzhar comes from the same root as the Zohar, which is the great Kabbalistic text of brilliance. It means shining, brilliant. So this AlAzhar University Imam, he's like the intellectual head of officially Sunni Islam, but he's also very knowledgeable about Shia and Ismaili and other forms of Islam, Sufi. He and the Pope signed a declaration, and thank you, Pope Francis, for going along and signing that. I say in the footnotes, it would have been better if they'd have invited the head of the University of Qom as well, the great Shia academic institutions, because I don't think the Pope should be, seem to be siding with one branch of Islam against another. I don't think the West, the Pope, the Church should take sides on the Shia-Sunni split. What we should be doing is trying to make them make peace. That's the Christian thing, and that's what the true Pope should have done. Bless him, and I hope, any of my Catholic friends out there want to get a message through. Pope Francis needs to go and sign a treaty with the University of Qom as well, where at least they allow Catholic churches in Tehran. They don't in Riyadh. He signed it in Abu Dhabi, in fact. Okay, then the Religions of Peace had their 10th World Assembly in Lindau in Germany, and I very nearly went, because I love Lindau. I've been there before. There's a peace museum. But instead I went in 2019, at the end of the year, I went to New Delhi for the 10th International Conference on Nonviolence and Peace. And again, I wrote the declaration I was asked to. This time I wrote it in poetic prose. It's the first declaration that's ever been done like that, because I'm a poet as well. These declarations all have a sort of formal, semi-legalistic style. I thought that it'd be more exciting to do it in a poetic prose. And so that's what that one is. I think it's the first time anyone's ever done such a peace declaration. If you find another one, let me know. There was also a youth wing of the World Intellectual Forum set up, and they issued a declaration. Then there was, of course, the Trump Declaration in January 2020, this year, which was hullabaloo in Washington. Netanyahu was there, and Kushner, and Trump, and they all got very proud about their declaration. It was rather silly they didn't invite any Palestinians. I mean, they're supposed to be making peace with Palestine. That's just, basics of conflict resolution, is you invite both parties. Anyway, I've given the declaration in full here, not all the annexes, because they're rather long, but I've given the main body of the text. Plus I footnoted my comments on it, because I want to give Trump the benefit of the doubt and his administration. I mean, they're the best president we've got at the moment, until the Americans either have a revolution and get rid of him, or, I don't know, rejoin the Commonwealth or something, or just give up, or I don't know, or elect another guy, a Joe Biden type. Until then, we've got Trump, so we might as well work with him. And I think there are some things in that declaration that are worth working with. I don't agree with the universal disapproval of it, shown by many people. Many intellectuals say, oh, it's so terrible, don't even look at it. I say, no, let's look at it and let's improve it. If we think we can do better, there are really serious issues about making peace between Palestine, Israel, Hamas, Gaza, etc. And there are so many shades of opinion, both in Palestinian and in Israeli society, that it's like squaring the circle. You need to be a Leonardo da Vinci to be able to calibrate all that stuff. Well, I've given some ideas on what's wrong with the Trump Declaration and then what bits we could build on. What I think is good about the Trump Declaration is it's the first peace declaration, I think, ever proposed that actually takes the faith issue seriously and tries to deal with it. And one of their declarations is that they will have a freedom of pilgrimage to all Palestinians, all Israelis can visit each other's countries and go to any sacred site they want. That's there in the text. I mean, that's visionary stuff, right? Because I'm a great believer in spiritual pilgrimage. I'm the guy that proposed we have a spiritual pilgrim centre at Stonehenge with my Druid hat on. Well, here we're getting a total free carte blanche to pilgrims in the entire Middle East. Sorry, in the whole of Israel and Palestine. Well, that's what the Templars wanted. That was what they were supposed to be doing. So why wouldn't one want to sign up to this? So I think let's use this declaration and turn it into something really exciting and actually get peace there. Because as you know, I want to open the Golden Gate in the old Temple Mount. And I want a big peace dome up there, sort of, movable, like a Bedouin giant tent, like a green gathering type of dome. And yeah, this is the best chance we've got, probably. So let's go for it, is what I'm saying. And I give the text. Then we've got the, okay, so now we have a constitutional reform initiative going on for the UK, because as I say, Brexit is not good news. Scots are not happy. They want, they're setting up a constitutional convention. They want a second independence vote. They're off, effectively. It's a matter of months, I think. Well, I'm proposing let's just reform the UK as it is. Let's all stay in the club, which was founded in 1707. Let's stick in it, but let's totally change it. let's get rid of the current anomalies and make it a club that we want to belong to. And in this declaration, the Constitutional Reform Initiative, I give a 9-point formula whereby that can be done. And that was issued by my institute. So do read it, it's very exciting. Finally, at the very end, 65, is the Institute's declaration on the COVID-19 outbreak when we're on planetary lockdown. So it's brought right up to date all these earlier declarations starting way back in 1707. I mean, it's like we're living through telescoped history. The problems facing the planet now are certainly on a more gargantuan scale than I anticipated when I was skipping around for joy in the early, well, between about 87 to 93, everything seemed to be going in the peace direction. And even, and then wars started breaking out in the Balkans, and it was a realization that might not be able to make this peace really gel. And now we're into a ridiculous situation after 9/11 and 2003 wars, and it's gone downhill. So, so there we are on planetary lockdown. I think this is a historic volume. I worked on it hard over Easter. I published it. You can get this, you can email me for the details or just go to my website. And so the last one, I'm not going to read the whole thing out, but is about the COVID crisis. And I'm going to end with, well, I suppose that it might be sensible to just read out, summarize, I won't read the whole thing. Okay, so what I'm saying is because we're suffering from this crisis, there's over 150,000 already dead on the planet. We need to have investigation fully and comprehensively into the etiology of the disease. And I had a conversation with the head of the WHO for Americas, the whole of Pan America, a couple of days ago on a Zoom cyber conference with the World Intellectual Forum involved. And I asked him, he's a professional epidemiologist, and I asked if there's a branch of epidemiology that looks at etiology, like the causes of diseases. Most epidemiology deals with the progress of a disease, how to block it, how to stop it. But there is a branch that deals with etiology, because you need to know where it's come from as well to fully, stop the thing recurring. And so in the declaration, I request that freedom of scientific flow of information by China, that they should release to the WHO and other bodies, scientific bodies, all the kind of data they've got on the outbreak of this disease, so we can crack it together. It's in the common interests of humanity, and that we can work together on solving this crisis. I then request the Secretary General of the UN to, under the Bioweapons Convention, whose text is in the book, to initiate inspections of all these labs around the world, just in case somebody made this thing, just in case. It needs to be gone into. I'm sorry, that's why we have these treaties. And if a country says, no, you can't look at our lab, then that is a bit of a alarm bell. It's interesting that Israel, for instance, is not a signed up member of the Bioweapons Convention of 1974. It's the only major state that has a bioweapons program that isn't a member. I think that's wrong. If I was an Israeli citizen, I'd be campaigning for us to join it, because that shows good form. Poor old Israel. A lot of people in Israel were survivors of the Holocaust. And Mengele and people did terrible experiments. So I think it's very bad that Israel isn't a member and should want to get rid of all biological weapons worldwide. So should join up and then, yes, open the labs to inspection. It wasn't us, Governor. That's what everyone should be saying. So then I call for the creation of a standing commission on demilitarization and disarmament to be set up by the UN. I think they should meet in Geneva, which does the disarmament commission work. And this is where I'm proposing, and this is a really radical proposal, but it's got to be done, folks, that the entire world's countries come together on this standing commission and are not allowed to stop meeting, like the cardinals when they elect a pope. They are not allowed to leave the Sistine Chapel. They're not allowed to leave Geneva. They meet every day from now on. No breaks for Christmas or anything, until we get a negotiated agreement to demilitarize every single state's military budget down to 5% of current expenditure. So we take the baseline of whatever, my country, Brazil, we spend X $million a year on weapons. My country, Russia, we spend X million. My country, Britain, my country, the States, Now, whatever they are, you bring it down you knock 95% off that. And you do this on the 1st of January 2023 or whatever. And for that next year, the budget is only 5% of current levels. So the military types are then given a 2-year phased time to work out how they can defend their country with 5% of their current levels of expenditure. And an awful lot of programs will be shut, a lot of R&D into advanced weapons and all that. No, it goes. And that could be negotiated, what I'm saying, in this Standing Commission on Demilitarization and Disarmament. Who am I to call for such a thing? Well, I'm calling on behalf of the groups, the organisations that I work with, the intellectuals of the world, really. We're saying, on behalf of the lockdown humanity, to our political leaders in every country, stop giving all this money to the warriors. It's ridiculous. Give it to the educators. Give it to the teachers. Give it to the scientists who are working on peace issues. Give it to the ecologists. Give it to the unemployed. Give it to the homeless. Give it to the people who are sick. Give it to the health systems. With that money, we could create a national health service worldwide